Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Community Day celebrating the Earth. I have great pleasure of interviewing and having an artist conversation with Willie Cole. But before we do that, I want to make sure that you're submitting all your questions on Facebook. We're on Facebook Live right now. We're also, if you logged into Zoom, use the Q&A feature either at the bottom or at the top of your screen, and I'll be asking Willie Cole questions throughout this presentation. So before we get started, my name is Jessica Nunez. I'm the Youth Program Manager at the Newark Museum of Art. And like I mentioned, we will be talking with artist Willie Cole. And Willie Cole is a self-described contemporary artist, perception engineer, an ecological mechanic transformer, using a lot of household goods since the 90s, and kind of reimagining and repurposing them, definitely reusing. And today, since we're highlighting the Earth, we thought it would be wonderful to hear a little bit about some of Willie Cole's projects and a little bit of his story. So we're gonna go ahead and get started, and I'm gonna hand the floor over to Willie, and don't forget to submit your questions. Willie, it's all yours.
Ah, okay. All right, well, it's great to be part of the Newark Museum of Art's presentation today. I know Earth Day is just a few days away.
Yes.
So, yes, I have been dubbed as a recycler. I actually received a recycling award from Morris County Recycling Commission.
Congratulations.
But that was before I began working with water bottles. They gave me that based on my work with steam irons.
Okay.
At that time, I didn't think of myself as a recycler. I was doing steam irons, water bottles, hair dryers, clocks, things like that. But the water bottles came on about 7 years ago. And now I recognize that I am not a recycler, I'm an upcycler.
Okay.
And I'm giving these objects new life, but I'm also giving the viewers a new perception. So I feel good about that. So most of my presentation here visually will be the water bottle projects. And those water bottle projects began as a dream for me. I had an exhibition at Grounds for Sculpture in Hamilton, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a dream come true. I expected a big budget to do something amazing outdoors. But in the first meeting, I realized that my exhibition would be indoors in the Domestic Arts Building Gallery, and that there was no budget. So over the next couple of days, while drinking water, it occurred to me that I can make something out of a water bottle. In fact, the first thing I did, I was sitting at a friend's house in Union by his pond, drinking water, and I observed all the cracks and crevices and lines in the bottle already, and realized the bottle's made to be compressed. So I began to squeeze those lines as if they were folds, as if it was plastic origami, and I was able to make a fish. So I was convinced that it could happen. And, you know, as it happens to me, usually that same night, I actually dreamed about this piece that's on the screen now. I dreamed about a chandelier with a picture of Buddha in every chandelier, called the Buddha chandelier. And in the dream, I heard those political speeches where they say a chicken in every pot, but instead I was hearing a Buddha in every bottle. So I made that, and it was really, I would say this was my second dream that surprised me and really became true in my life in terms of visual arts. The first one was back during the anti-apartheid movement. I dreamed about Nelson Mandela, that everybody in the world was Nelson Mandela. So I ended up making a piece called 10,000 Mandelas, using cardboard cutouts of Mandela and putting them all over Greenwich Village and Soho in the wee hours of the night with a crew of about 20 people. And that was a dream come true, inspired by Christo doing public art things in Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of had the same kind of feeling for me. But I think the next image might show you the finished piece, actually. If you can
Let's
switch.
see. I think the video is still playing. But while it plays,
here it is. So this is just a close-up, so you can see the Buddha in the bottles there.
They're
And
beautiful.
it's pretty much just a transparency, printed with an inkjet printer on transparent film, inserted in the bottles. This is what the piece actually looked like.
It
It's
has
about a
3,000 bottles.
yes, it's about a 10-foot
Wow.
diameter, or rather 10-foot, 10 by 10. It's actually more of a pyramid, square on top. And it led to a show at this place, Pacific Street Fire Station in Newark. And you'll see how I was able to convert the interior of the firehouse to look nothing like a firehouse at all. For me, I'm still in a dream here. And I bring all of my bottles here. I hang up 2 chandeliers and basically converted the space. So these are my very first water bottle projects. I had no idea that I'd still be doing them all these years later. You can see here step by step how I convert the space. I put the bottles together in sheets. So now they're like curtains, and they allowed me to divide the space to create an environment. You see
And
on
I
the
see
floor
that
there,
there's a metal armature that's holding them together.
well, it's 12 gauge galvanized wire. So I actually poke a hole in the top and the bottom of the bottle and thread that wire through. That wire is what the recycling places use to bale paper and cardboard. So it's also a recycling material. And this is the finished piece here. So it's ended up being 2 rooms that are 15 by 15 feet each, a chandelier in each room, and a 3-foot hallway between them. And it was very magical for me because not only am I recycling, but I am attracting light. And that actually appeals to me even more than the idea of recycling. A light, sunshine on plastic is a beautiful thing, especially on a sunny day. You see, I had a very receptive audience here.
Oh,
So this is a
they're
smaller
quite
version of the Buddha
stunning.
chandelier. Pardon?
They're quite stunning. How do you source all these plastic bottles?
Well, if you look around, they're easy to find. So my mom lives in an apartment building that has like 22 floors and 2 buildings. Her janitor in the building started saving them for me 7 years ago. So now I have a shipping container next to my barn here that is filled with millions of bottles. So I don't really have to collect them anymore. But when I do projects, I always ask my host to provide me with 20,000 bottles. That way I have a continuous supply. And here you see, this is me threading the bottles onto wire. The challenge here is that the wire is a big spool in this case, and the bottles have to be slid down the wire. So with my left hand, I'm pushing them down the line. With my right hand, I'm pulling them up.
Yeah.
So I know it looks like I'm a mad conductor of Plastic Symphony, but
But this video alone is super performative. And then when we see
and
this,
this is the results
to
of
see
it
a
here.
final product.
These are all the bottles that I would thread onto the wire here.
Wow.
With the chandeliers, I use a 12-foot length, but for other projects, I use this big spool of wire. That's what this is here. You can see the wire goes through it. It has a hook at the end on the cap to keep them from sliding off. But that was a long time ago. I don't use the caps anymore. They're a different kind of plastic. They break down faster than the PET of the bottles. But this is all collected bottle stuff. I do a lot of work outside of my yard, especially when the weather's warm, of course, because most of the bottle pieces are large, and my studio currently is in my house. This is a piece at...
I have a few questions coming in.
Yes.
Willie, I have a few questions coming in. Sorry to interrupt.
Right.
Someone wants to know, how did growing up in New Jersey and the environment impact your work?
How did growing up in New Jersey and the environment impact my work? Well, I would say the environment expanded to society impacted me because of contact with other humans and information and the media. You know, growing up in Newark back in the 50s when it was a nice, safe place, you could walk down the street with no problem. It was just a great experience. I was not in Newark during the riots. I was in California that summer. But, and using found objects as a result of also being in Newark and not having money to buy paint and brushes after college, finding things on the street. So I would say Newark has been feeding me for many years with my work. These are
Thank
just
you.
other chandelier images made in, I did this in South America, in Colombia. Everybody had a picture of the Niños Divino, I believe it's called, in their home. So I decided to put
Yeah.
him in bottles. So one chandelier has Niños Divinos, the other one has the Holy Mother. And they're in a kind of like a place that used to be a nunnery. It's a
Uh-huh.
big, beautiful building with beautiful gardens.
Now, did you bring a crew from the US or did you have people in the
No,
community in Colombia help you?
I wish I could say it all in Spanish, but my crew was totally from Colombia.
Okay, de Colombia, I'll help you.
Yes. These are chandeliers being made, here in New Jersey, uh, in my outdoor studio. In Colombia, though, I had 5 people. This one is was in a show that just ended. It traveled for a year. Fortunately, the chandelier inspired a place called the Art Yard to commission me to make 2 for them. So if you go to New Jersey and the Pennsylvania border, you'll see 2 chandeliers in a place called the Art Yard.
So this particular piece reminds me of, well, looks very much like the piece you're sitting in front of. Is it
Oh,
similar? Is
that's the
it
power of
dyed?
color. That's the power of
Okay.
color, the giant strawberry, yes. So I just put colored film inside of the bottles there. But
Oh, okay.
all those chandeliers are about 6 feet long. This piece here is probably, I don't know, it might be 30 or 40 feet tall. It's very similar to the chandelier, but it's been re-tagged as a tornado.
Wow.
And this was commissioned by the Summit Arts Council. The kids in Summit collected all the bottles. And I
That's a
had a
great
crew of,
way to get the community to kind of chime in.
that's what I love about these water bottle pieces. They're community projects. A lot of art is made in isolation in my case, but these projects always involve communities. And I like that a lot. It gives
That
me a chance,
segue, go ahead, sorry.
to be the educator. The
Hmm.
kids are a captive audience as they put holes in the bottles or as they thread them on the wire. It
I
teaches
have
a
a
lot
few
about
other
recycling.
questions coming in.
Okay.
Um, Someone wants to know how has COVID-19 affected your creativity?
Interesting. COVID-19 has brought me to the awareness that all the truisms about live for today, life is short, don't take it for granted, all those things are very real for me now. I told myself that I would just be 100% full-blown Willie. And,
Yeah,
it's challenging because I still live in the world where there's bad news on TV and all that stuff, but it's affected me. It's made me more out in my production. It's made me desire to finish a piece a day as opposed to a piece a week or a piece a month also.
hmm.
It's also inspired me to
I hope a lot
play
of people
music.
take that into consideration,
Yeah.
Willie, just like you, like live to your fullest, live your truth, right?
Yes. Yeah. Tomorrow may not be what it is today, or it may not be at all.
Right.
These are in South
Absolutely.
Orange at Wildflower Sculpture Park. Giant flowers there made from bottles. Beautiful
What do
with
you do with the
sunshine.
bottles after the art, after the art has been displayed, or is it temporary? Are they temporary installations? What happens to the materials afterward?
Well, it's actually been both. Um, Sometimes I recycle them into new pieces,
Okay.
but mostly the pieces I've made have been traveling around, so I don't have to store them. I do have a 30-foot giant in my front yard right now, sitting by a tree. But these flowers are still in the park. If you go to South Orange Mountain Reservation, it's right near the dog park or dog walk there off of South Orange Avenue. And
All
I
right.
had originally planned to fill the meadow with these, but I've only done 4 so far.
Someone has a questions about your wildflowers. The spikes coming out, either it was a few images back.
Right.
Are they also plastic?
Yes, those are zip ties.
Oh, okay. Zip ties.
Yeah, yes.
Um,
And this is the
Fern has a
stainless steel
question.
ring that they're inside of.
is that also recycled material similar to the armature used when you're stringing the bottles?
No, well, metals can be called recycled because you can melt them down and reform them. But these are stainless steel rims that I had made as an armature. Zip ties are not quite recycled. They're just plastic. They're recycled in my studio. I mean, I use this stuff over and over again when I can. I'm known for not throwing anything away.
That's good though. I mean, I
Yeah,
have
it's
to
crazy
say,
sometimes.
I feel like I'm guilty as charged because I have items and I was like, but I can use it for something else. Like to give it another life. Once it's placed
Exactly.
in a different environment, it's something quite beautiful and very,
Right.
very different.
Yeah, I find in creativity in general, once you decide or accept that you don't know, you are flooded with new possibilities. So if I just say, oh, a bottle, then it's just a bottle. But if I say, look at that. Look how the light plays on that. Look at that shape. Man, that thing is
Absolutely.
filled with my breath, things like that just makes it blossom.
Yeah. I have a few more questions coming in. With the COVID situation, how will you be processing water bottles moving forward?
Well, as I said, I have a shipping container with millions of bottles already that have already been washed and sterilized. So
Mm.
I will continue to use those bottles. Um, but that's a very good question. And I think that's a question that my sponsors will be asking me as well. But my current supply is good enough to make many more pieces. And they've
All
all
right.
been sterilized and stored for like several years now.
Having made these larger installations, do you prefer larger scale? Do you think it affects people in a different way?
Well, definitely. I mean, the cliche of size matters can be applied to many things. And when you can walk around something, or when you can imagine something overpowering you, falling on you, or it's like the effect of a movie screen as compared to a screen on your phone. The impact is
Right.
larger. That's one thing I like about the bottles. They've allowed me to make larger pieces that are not very heavy, very lightweight.
Hmm.
Um, this is a crew helping me install a piece in Baltimore, Maryland, at the David Driscoll Center.
Right.
And this piece is 30 feet in diameter.
In the background, where you're doing the installation, was that your scorching work?
Yes, yeah, that was my show. This is the
All
piece that
right.
we were installing on the ceiling there.
So I have a few questions about medium. What do you think is the most important medium, whether it was in the Scorched Iron series or in the woman's shoe sculpture?
Well, I wouldn't apply the word important to any of that work except for the water bottles, because the water bottles
Okay.
have an immediate impact on environmental awareness. Whereas the shoes, I'm talking about cultural aesthetics,
Hmm.
about stereotypes used to describe women, things like that, which a lot of people talk about that, especially in music. So
I'm
the water
gonna
bottle,
cheat a little and look in my email because I know a few more questions
it's okay.
have trickled in. But tell me about this car, because now I've seen this car in a few places. Some of the next slides are
Hmm.
really, really incredible.
Yeah, I've made 3 cars over the past 7 years. And the first one was part of the show at Grounds for Sculpture. But I try to be conceptual as well as contextual. So I made
Mm.
a car out of bottles because the bottles made of plastic, and plastic is a byproduct of oil, the oil industry. So somehow it just seemed like a car would be a great thing. I also think about hydropower or solar powered vehicles. And I would always say to myself, if Jesus Christ drove a car, he'd drive this car. And I call it the H2O TBR, as opposed to the Chevy Malibu. But H2O TBR means water to be recycled.
Mm.
So that's my car story. This is last year at New York Earth Day. I forget what street this is. It may be Fifth Avenue and 38th Street, I think, something like that. I was commissioned by the garment industry to make 2
Oh
pieces to
yeah,
be part of Earth Day.
this is one of my favorite pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is a car that I don't have anymore. I took this apart because I never made that could actually roll before. And after doing this, I realized, learned how I could do it a lot better. So I took it apart and plan to rebuild it. But
I have
that's
a
a lot
question
different
from
than
Facebook coming in.
okay.
It says, can you tell us what art means to you in the conception, making, and the sharing of
Ah, man, these questions. What does art mean to me
it?
in the conception? Well, the conception is a moment of stress, because if I can make a living just conceiving, I'd be very happy. But once I conceive it, I don't have to make it if I really want to, make a living and be seen, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So conception, comes in a relaxed state, but then you're faced with a new start, like a writer staring at a blank page. So there's a little stress in that. But once it's out of the studio and in the public place, I don't really feel like it's mine anymore. So I just experience it like everybody else. And I like that feeling.
That's really special, being able to remove yourself once you've produced something.
I think it has to do with the fact that I think of myself more as a tool as opposed to a creator. So, these ideas come into me. I don't come up with them. They come into me, and I allow, myself to be the tool that makes them. So that's how I can be removed from it.
I have a very specific question here.
Mhm.
Has the foundry that you use made copies of the Soul uh, Seeker in smaller sizes? We know that Jeff Koons made his balloon dogs in many sizes and colors.
Yes, I have made at least two of my shoe sculptures into bronze at different sizes. There's the shoe
Okay.
size, there's a 4-foot size, and there's a 6-foot size so far. Um, they have to start out small because they're made from shoes, but I really like them at the 4-foot scale a lot.
Now, this is something, Willie, that we had spoken about before we went live, but this question says, back to growing up in Newark, what was the influence of the Newark Museum of Art on your artistry?
The Newark Museum was everything to me as a kid. It's the first place I saw African art, first place I saw art outside of a family member's house. And I took classes at the Newark Museum as a little kid at the Newark, back then I think they had the Newark's Children's Department or something like that. And I took puppet making there. So it was very important for me as a kid. And all the way through, even in college, I demonstrated in front of the Newark Museum, ignorantly, thinking they didn't have any artists of color in their collection. I was totally wrong, but I didn't know enough about art to recognize artists by names.
Yeah.
And when I was a student at Boston University, I worked at Newark Museum during the summer teaching.
Okay.
So it's always been important to me. I go all the way back to Sam Miller.
Yeah. I think that feeling resonates with a lot of the staff, a lot of the youth that have gone through the museum who definitely come back, both in support and as staff members.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, very much so. During my transitional period from graphic design to fine art, the Newark Museum hired my company to document some events. So I had that experience too with the museum.
Someone else says, what are your favorite pieces of art at the Newark Museum of Art?
Well, I don't know every piece in the collection, but I really am a great fan of the Tibetan things there. I like the shrine there especially. When I was a little kid, they had a big Nimba sculpture in the entry lobby,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved that as a kid. But I would have to say, I like all the Tibetan and Indian collection.
Okay. We see some more of the printed images in water bottles. So they're printed on separate material, correct?
Yeah, in this case, I asked each student to bring a photo of themselves that we would then print onto this Mylar and insert it in the bottles. So each of them
Okay.
would make a puppet but it will be their face in the puppet.
Someone has a question, maybe a little bit more specific in the timeline. When was this transition? When was this dream that you had to kind of veer into using water bottles as a material? Do you remember? Maybe around about a
Yeah,
year. I think this person might want to know.
yeah, it was 7 years ago.
Okay, 7 years ago.
Yeah,
We
7
have another Facebook question. Do you always use found objects in your work?
Well, you know, there's the public and the private persona. I am a illustrator by training, and I don't make a living at illustration anymore, but I still do drawing and painting a lot. Currently, I'm working on a children's story that I'm illustrating based on one of my sculptures. And I have a lot of paintings I've done over the years that I don't exhibit.
Okay.
And here you see photos that I've taken in this image here, found objects.
Let's see, I have a few more questions coming in. Oh, this is in reference to the car. Did you get a parking ticket?
This puts me on the spot here. No, I didn't get a parking ticket. He came over to me for sure, but I told him that I had the city's permission to park there because they closed the street down for Earth Day. They had vendors
Okay.
everywhere. And I was like at the edge of that whole presentation. So I told him that I was part of that event, that the city gave me the permit to be there. So I didn't really get a ticket, but I did get harassed by the police.
Oh, I think. All right. Oh, I have a question from an 8-year-old who wants to know, what is your favorite color?
Ah, that sounds like a simple question, but for me, it's not. My favorite colors for seeing are orange and green, like the combination together. And orange and yellow, cadmium yellow, makes me think of Vincent van Gogh. And so I like those colors for that reason.
All right.
For wearing, I've gone through different periods where I only want to wear black, only want to wear white. So that's the best I can do. People say I look good in red, so that's my favorite color, I guess, too.
All right. How would you say science is used in your artwork? And does science and history have a significant impact on your work? And if so, how?
Well, art is a science, I feel. My work, especially the water bottle work, involves a lot of math. So it's kind of like engineering. Like yesterday, I making a turntable, and I had to figure out how to make something that weighed 100 pounds spin easily on a turntable without having machinery. So it's more of that kind of science, mechanical science. And the second part of that question was?
History. Does
History.
science and history have a
Right.
significant impact
Well,
on your work?
history is created in the moment. So the moment that you make something, you're making history. Artists reflect on things on a timeline. So a lot of things are inspired by your personal history, things that you've experienced or read about prior to the day that you're making that object. So history plays a very important role. In fact, when human beings are no longer on the earth, the artifacts will be discovered. So art plays an important role in documenting history in the past, present, and the future.
Thank you. I have a quote here. You can tell me if it's fake news now, but this is a quote that says, "The objects have memory and history of their own." So if you have a slave or a domestic worker, people working for little money, their objects have a memory of that experience. I wanted to know if you could elaborate on that quote a little bit and how that touches some of the materials you use in your work.
Yes, well, I read that Albert Einstein said that 90% of dust in our homes is from us. And that every place that you've been in your life, you've left a little bit of you, the residue. I imagine sheets, every night you're in the bed, you're shedding skin cells, you know. So we leave that residue wherever we are. So in the case of steam irons, and my steam iron had to do with the transatlantic slave trade, I would imagine that the enslaved person holding an iron or any object, they're leaving their essence on it as well. And that's what I would call the memory of that person. So the object has the memory. It's more obvious with shoes because I've seen my own shoes take the shape of my foot after a few years of wearing them. So shoes have a memory of form. The water bottles to me have a spirit memory because you put it up to your mouth, so your spirit enters the bottle. So I guess that's an answer, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. We have a few more questions about the water bottles. And I think you might have mentioned it before, but a few people want to know how the bottles are held together. Also, why do you use water bottles for art?
Okay. Well, I use water bottles for art because of their dream and because they're available, because I have been inspired by artists like Carl Andre and Armand, who use single objects in multiples or in repetition. I think it satisfies my idea about multiplication, basically, like the way nature creates. Nature multiplies. Everything is one cell multiplied. So in my work, I'm using single objects multiplied because I'm creating the same way that nature does. The water bottles allowed me to make a statement as well as a work of art. Of course, attacking these environmental concerns about accumulated waste. I know my sculptures are not going to eliminate the problem, but they make people think about it and talk about it more. So that's why I use the water bottles.
Thank you. Let's see, questions are still trickling in.
And this is the last image here. It's this dancing machine here. This is the puppet I make with little kids in schools. Well, not little kids, but students, I should say.
What's making it move? Is that just you pulling on it?
Yes, I got a string on the top. Just dancing in the studio there.
I was going to say, is this one of your mechanical inventions?
Yeah. No, I'm currently working on an animation with this character.
Okay. Now, is he just a smaller, were you going for a smaller replica of your water bottle giant?
Yes, I guess you could say that. You know, scale is an important element, an important fuel for creativity. Anything that I can make big, I want to be able to make small as well.
Okay.
You know, just for marketing, but also just the challenge of it. Since I like the idea of dealing with numbers, it's like I can make a 12 bottle figure, make a 3,000 bottle figure. You know?
Yeah.
Just the challenge of it, I enjoy.
Now, your water bottle giant, is it the same giant that has lived in a lot of different environments, or are they multiple giants that have lived simultaneously in different environments?
Right, I've made 3 giants so far. One of them was a recycled of his predecessor.
Okay. Let me see here. I have a few questions still from Facebook. I do have a question. I know a lot of young people often struggle with sharing their artwork or feeling emboldened and confident to share. What was a turning point for you? How did you get to a point where you felt super comfortable in being able to share your work publicly? Or is it something you knew you always wanted to do?
Yeah, I would say I always wanted to do it because I've been doing it since I was a little kid. You know, it's in my household growing up, my art was a great tool for unity. You know, if I came into the living room with a painting or drawing, suddenly I got a bigger sense of family. You know,
Okay.
of course I got a lot of focus too, but it seemed to bring people together. And I've been studying art my
Yeah.
whole life, so a lot of questions that some people might have never occurred to me. Like I never asked myself, you know, what I want to be when I grow up. I always knew. And in the college days, I read so much about the art business. I
Hmm.
knew that I would have to enter that business to continue to make art full time, and that I had to be able to let go of the work once it was made. So I had to share it and hopefully sell it.
Okay.
So no problems there for me.
Do you have any encouraging words for kids who want to start sharing their work and who are afraid or nervous?
Well, I'm glad you said kids and not people, because it's different for kids than it is for adults.
Hmm.
I would say that don't feel nervous. Be aware that everything around you is a work of art that somebody else is sharing. But a lot of those people who have designed your TV or your furniture started out like you as a little kid with a doodle, with a drawing, something to just make them say, "Mommy, look," and it grows into greater things.
Hmm.
So just go for it. You know, don't be discouraged. You know, it's natural. What's unnatural is
All right.
it's taught out of you as you get older.
Yes. Yes. I feel like as adults, we definitely have more inhibitions. We're more afraid. I mean, even
Right.
things like language learning, right? We're afraid how we sound like to be judged.
Listen, I've been studying Spanish for the past 4 months, so I know what
Uh-huh.
you mean about language. It sounded funny, wrong accent, that kind of stuff.
Just I totally believe in you. As a as an education department, we've started to learn Spanish, so I've been teaching them. We have weekly classes, so we'll
Yeah.
share that link with you.
Yeah.
I have another question for you. Do you feel that by using found objects, you are bridging and combining folk and fine art?
Well, I think that my work in general combines what's called outsider art and contemporary art. But I also recognize that those are just marketing terms, because if I didn't have a college degree, they would probably call me a folk artist. But because I have a college degree,
Okay,
I'm a contemporary artist, you know.
gotcha.
And everything that is in the museums has been folk evolving towards everything else. You know, everything starts with the
Hmm.
folks, basically. You know.
Okay. I have a few more questions. Do your ideas come to you in a flash of inspiration, or is there a more methodology? I can't even say the word, guys. Is there a deeper process in experimenting until you find the right thing?
I go more with the flash than experiment, even though neither one is totally accurate for me. It's
Okay.
the challenge for me is that I have decided and claimed to live in inspiration. The word inspiration means in the spirit. So I choose to live in the spirit. So I don't have to
Hmm.
struggle for ideas or wait for ideas. I just have to be. And everything is inspiring to me. As I said, I dream
It's
about
really
this stuff.
beautiful.
I dream about this stuff. So how easy can't get much easier than that.
It's really beautiful. Someone wants to know a little bit about your family upbringing. Did your family encourage your ambitions to be an artist?
My family encouraged my creativity. They didn't know anything about the business of art, but they encouraged my creativity, I would say. Of course, my mom would say that you can always get a job with me at the post office. My dad worked in the factory. You can always get a job with me at the plant. And they didn't know the business. But they supported me once I decided to make that move. Now, my mom brought me care packages to my studio when I lived in Newark because I had no income.
Hmm.
And as a little kid, my father would bring home pencil and papers and pencil sharpeners. And he built me a light table when I was about 8 years old because I wanted to be, at that time, I was into being a cartoonist. So my dad made a light table for me. So they were definitely supportive of creativity. They didn't know the business.
Okay. I have another one relating to focusing on children in art. As you said, regarding children and art. In the world of the COVID virus, what words of encouragement can you offer to parents in supporting their children even as they deal with today's angst?
Words of advice, you say? Is that what you said?
For parents to kind of support their children, yeah.
Oh, wow, that gives me a chance to quote Obama and say that's above my pay grade, but let me think about it for a minute. Because I don't
But
have
think
any little kids
about,
around me anymore. Of course.
in the same vein, I think in the same vein, because of the virus, people want to know, how will this transform your work? Will you wear a face mask and gloves or be inspired to work with those materials?
Well, it's funny. For years, I've been thinking about making face masks of this N95 style and doing silkscreen printing on them, but I never did. Um, I have thought about the present situation in terms of art production, and I don't want to say what I've decided or seen, but I think that parents should encourage their kids to do drawings of their happier days, or at least their projected days that they would love to have when this is all over. Yes, I wear masks and gloves now, but I've only been at a house 3 times since like mid-January. I buy enough stuff to last me for a month. And the days I'm out, I do everything in that same day, which is not unusual for artists because quarantine is my natural state. I'm in the house most time anyway.
Okay.
And I live in a beautiful place. I can go outside and walk around. I live near water. I can go sit down by the stream. So I don't really feel it until I come into a bigger town.
All right. So the impact is a little bit different. I think
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
having that opportunity to be out and be outside in nature
yeah,
is
yeah.
more relaxing and
Yeah, like
calming
my
for one's
street has
spirit.
no sidewalks. There are no people walking up and down the street.
Okay.
So it's just,
People, Willie, are enamored with the piece behind you. So could you talk about the piece that's right behind you on your wall?
ah, yes, maybe about, wow, maybe about 5 years ago, I did a residency at the University of Hawaii. I was in a town called Hilo. And the director of the art
Hmm.
school had a friend who lived up on this beautiful mountain with beautiful flower gardens. And when I was there, my job was to make a print. So after seeing the garden, I decided I would make flowers. And I crushed a bunch of water bottles and put them on a light table and then photographed it. And so we made a photo plate. All the patterns that are on the plastic and all the shadows that are created by crushing the bottles made the piece. When I got back to the US, excuse me, when I got back to New Jersey, I decided to make the piece three-dimensionally. And I started crushing bottles, embedding them in epoxy resin, and making stencils that allow me to spray paint patterns on them to replicate flowers. So I've made a few of them. One was on display at Rutgers University in the Express Nook building for a few months, but I think the show is down now. But I've made a few of them, and they're still evolving. They're still evolving.
It's quite beautiful. So then you put the stencils and you've been spraying them
Yes,
with
it's
different
like,
colors, or is it the same color pattern?
no, each one is different, but they're all just one or two colors. So
Okay.
my stencil is like almost like a branding iron. It's on a long stick. I put it on the end of the bottle and I spray around it to get the color to, form certain shapes and patterns.
Okay. Someone wants to know now, well, this is your natural state,
Yes.
unlike all of us in quarantine. Um, what do you think about your next project? Do you have a plan for an upcoming project? Are you continuing with the water bottles, or are you shifting materials?
Well, as I said, I'm always open for inspiration and ideas. I write them down, so I have a list I can go through and choose something. But currently, I had 4 projects canceled, public art projects, because of the virus. But the one that's supposed to take place in July is still on, and it's in Germany, and it's a water bottle project. So,
Wow.
virus permitting, that was what happened. In the studio here, though, I took a piano apart a few months ago, an all upright piano with a screwdriver. It took me a week to do it, but I saved all the parts. And a friend of mine threw her piano away, so I have all these piano parts. So I'm looking at those, playing with those, but I don't know what it's going to be. I do a lot of things at once, so this is a long list of things. I'm also involved in 3D form design and have been working on games using some of my sculptures as characters or game pieces. I'm also writing a children's story that I've been illustrating. I started writing it a year ago, but I'm working on illustrations now. I'm also, putting myself out more as a musician, because I don't do that much these days. So that's my Instagram project, playing music on the guitar.
So you heard it
So
here,
many things.
guys. You should follow Willie Cole on Instagram.
Yes, Willie Cole Art. But the fact that
There you go. Willie Cole Art on
the fact that
Instagram.
we're not promised tomorrow has led me to pull everything to the present. So I'm doing more than I've ever done at one time before.
So it has definitely shifted your mentality a bit.
Yes, not that I took life for granted, but I didn't expect this. Nobody did.
Right,
And
of course.
we don't know how long it's going to last. We know the government wants to do things to get the economy rolling, but those things are really testing the public. So they could be reversed after 1 or 2 days as they realize the effects are not working. There still needs to be more isolation. So I'm thinking about how I will continue my life inside of the COVID-19. I tried to find parallel experiences, and I said, well, Picasso survived world wars, still making art. But by the time the war broke out, he was already a millionaire, so it was easy to survive. So in my case, I'm not a millionaire, but I'm comfortable, and I have always lived on faith. There's nothing guaranteed in my life anyway. I've been self-employed since 1981. And my whole success and survival depends on my own initiative, will, and desire. So I still have a lot of faith in my abilities to make things happen for me or to attract things to myself. So looking forward to good results.
That's really beautiful. I mean, I have total faith in you. We talked about this a little off camera. I'm a huge fan. And, I've had the opportunity to hear Willie speak at the museum and see your work. And working with teens, they're always super inspired by your pieces. Someone here wants to know if you can talk a little bit about your bronze shoe sculpture that's displayed at the Newark Museum of Art, the Soul Sitter.
Yes. Let's see. In 2005, I was an artist. No, actually, I had the title of being a fellow at the University of Georgia. And I did not bring any materials with me there. I was there for 1 year. And I decided that I would go to the local thrift store and just buy all the shoes they had. I offered them 50 cents a pound. And they started saving them for me in September. And in January, they gave me like tons and tons of shoes. I still have some of those shoes now. And the Soul Sitter came out of that process. So I was there and I started making a mask. When I came back to New Jersey a year later, I had a show scheduled in New York City and a new studio here in New Jersey also. And the Soul Sitter was like a piece to play with. It wasn't assembled to be a permanent work of art. I had the head separate from the arms, separate from the torso, and separate from the legs. And each day I would give it a different pose based on how I felt. And then at some point I said, I should just make this a real piece. And I did. Another connection to the University of Georgia, though, was that I had not done any bronze casting before. But while at the University of Georgia, I was in the art department. I was like the star of the art department as a special guest. So I sat in on everything I could to learn as much as I could, and discovered a foundry there called the Infernal Foundry in Union City, Georgia. And I started doing cast of my sculptures the year after I left Georgia at this foundry. It was the foundry director that said, he said, Willie, I think these pieces would be great if you enlarged them, because I was just doing actual size pieces. And he
Okay.
said I should enlarge them, and I tried it and I liked it. So now I think I'm only going to be making them in large and in bronze. The small ones are just for my use to make the mold.
Okay. Willie, I think we have time for one last question. Um, Someone's referencing the crystal that you mentioned earlier. Do you have any interest in doing anything on a Cristo-like scale?
I do. I would say back in the 80s, I thought that I would do one crystal scale piece a year. I did the 10,000 Mandalas inspired by Christo in part.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't done anything since then of that scale that involved a team of people and video cameras and production. But yes, I definitely want to do that. I don't have an idea in mind that's strictly fine art, but I'm also a writer, and I have lots of screenplays that are like big creative projects that I would love to see in the world. And this COVID has moved them close to the top of my list. So I'm going to get one of those done in the next 12 months.
Thank you so much for having a chat with us today. I'm so excited, and I know everyone's looking forward to seeing all of your new creations, all of these new ideas come into fruition. Make sure you are following Willie Cole Art on Instagram, like and share. And again, thank you so much. Don't forget that we are still live for the rest of the day, I believe, until after 3. We're closing out with Bash the Trash. But next up at 1 o'clock is our live animals. So make sure to stay tuned, okay? Again, thank you so much, Willie Cole. Thank you, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the rest of our virtual Earth Day.
Thank you. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.